10 years ago, a white supremacist walked into the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, opened fire, killing 6 worshipers in cold blood. At the time, it was one of the deadliest hate crimes in modern American history. In hindsight, it was just the latest in a wave of violent, hate-filled attacks. After the attack, I held a hearing on hate crimes and the threat of domestic terrorism. Sadly, decades later, this threat has only grown. I'd like to start the hearing with a video on the wave of hate crimes that has swept our country.
Investigators say that a suspect entered the Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, during its Sabbath morning service and took the rabbi and 3 others hostage.
We are following new reports this morning of bomb threats at historically black colleges and universities.
The neo-Nazi group attacked, pepper sprayed, beat up, and spit on a Jewish college student, reportedly because he had an Israeli flag icon on his license frame.
A terrifying 2 hours of hate crimes in New York City. All 7 women assaulted were Asian American.
Yesterday, I went into Spelman College University with a backpack on, with 2 explosives in them. Because of this reason, there are too many black students in it.
We are getting a better idea of just how many bomb threats have been made against historically black colleges and universities and other institutions for that matter over the past few months. The FBI said since the beginning of the year, at least 57 HBCUs, houses of worship, and other institutions have been targeted. More than 30 FBI field offices are looking into the threats and investigating them as racially or ethnically motivated hate crimes.
That's more than 1 threat per day.
The prosecution found evidence saying all 3 men had a history of racism.
No one had been convicted of a federal hate crime in the state of Georgia before today.
As they were hitting me and taking off my hijab, they continuously kept saying, "I got you now."
The woman talking about, I don't want this kind of person sitting in front of me.
Y'all sell y'all's people, you garbage.
I must continue to fight. I don't think a mother should go through the heartbreak that I've went through.
We are hardly 3 months into 2022, and already our nation has seen a spate of hate crime. In January, as was reported, a man entered a Texas synagogue, held 4 Jewish worshipers hostage at gunpoint. Thank goodness no worshipers were harmed, but that was due to the heroic acts of state, federal law enforcement, and Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, who will join us today. A few weeks later, a number of Jewish-owned businesses and synagogues in my home state of Illinois were vandalized with anti-Semitic graffiti, including spray-painted swastikas. More than 24 historically black colleges and universities have received bomb threats in the last 2 months, including as recently as last week. The threat of violence hangs over the head of thousands of students who are told to shelter in place instead of attending classes. These threats are being investigated as hate crimes and domestic terrorism by the FBI. On February 23rd, a Texas man pleaded guilty to federal hate crime charges after brutally attacking an Asian family at Sam's Club, where he stabbed a 6-year-old child and his father while yelling, "Get out of America." And 2 weeks ago, 3 men were convicted of federal hate crime charges in the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, a black man they chased and killed when he jogged through a suburban neighborhood in Georgia. The list goes on and on and on. This much is clear. No community in America is immune from violent acts of hate, and Congress cannot ignore the appalling rise in hate incidents we've seen recently. The FBI's most recent annual report revealed that hate crimes in 2020 were at the highest level since 2001, with more than 8,000 criminal incidents reported. These figures are sobering, but they don't tell the whole story. According to the Justice Department's Bureau of Statistics, there are actually hundreds of thousands of hate crimes across our country each year. Many are reported by victims, and when they are, state and federal police too often do not report them to the FBI. We have to address this reporting gap. When criminals attack our neighbors based on who they are, where they're from, how they pray, who they love, they have to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We must also be honest about the role of hateful rhetoric in fueling these violent acts. For too often in recent years, elected officials and prominent media personalities have stoked the embers of fear. Hate speech divides America. It preys on prejudice. It puts a target on the backs of members of marginalized community. It makes America less safe. It is especially dangerous given the growing threat of violent extremism, which FBI Director Chris Wray has called, quote, a close cousin of hate crimes. Last March, Director Wray told this committee that the threat of violent extremism is, quote, metastasizing across the country and not going away anytime soon. As I've said time and again, violence to advance political or ideological goals is unacceptable, no matter where on the spectrum it occurs. But we cannot have an honest discussion about hate crimes without acknowledging the role of violent white supremacists, which our intelligence and law enforcement agencies have said pose the most lethal domestic terror threat. The good news is this Congress has taken some steps in the right direction to respond to hate crimes. Last year, we passed and President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. Important bipartisan bill expanded the Justice Department toolkit for addressing the appalling rise in hate incidents targeting members of the AAPI community and other communities at risk. That legislation also included the Jabara Hauer No Hate Act, which will provide hate crime reporting and expand resources for victims. None of us are under the illusion that one bill or one committee hearing is a silver bullet for preventing hate crimes. There's more to do, and during today's hearings, I look forward to learning what we can do to better support the survivors of hate crime and the members of law enforcement who respond to them. With that, I turn to Senator Grassley.